Hello and welcome to another edition of the NRS Insights podcast. I'm John Lovestock, and I am joined again today by Suzy Silliman, the Senior Vice President of Data Strategy and Sales at NRS, and Brandon Thurber, the Vice President of Data Sales and Client Success at NRS. And today we'll be discussing the National Retail Solutions and NRS Insights September 2024 Same-Store Sales Report. And for those of you who don't know, NRS has expansive reach into retail. Their network includes more than 32,700 active terminals, processing about $20 billion a year in sales over the past 12 months at independent retailers, including bodegas, convenience stores, liquor stores, grocers, and many others nationwide. So I want to welcome you two. How are you?
We're doing
Good.
great. How about you?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's good to
Shout out to the Steelers for a late night Sunday night football win.
I'm a Dolphins fan, as I was telling
Okay.
Brandon. So anytime the Jets lose, I'm pretty happy. But where's my shout out for the Yankees?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, silence.
Yankees, Dodgers, World Series, right?
It's like my childhood all over again. So I was looking over the same store report for 2024, and there was a modest 2.2% year over year increase, but in today's standards, it's probably pretty good. Other highlights I noticed were that units sold increased 2.9% year over year, that the average transactions per store rose, and that smokeless tobacco continues its impressive run. And then tequila, which is I don't recall us talking about tequila recently, so tequila and prepared cocktails are also up. However, declines continued in chocolate and confection, which still surprises me, and vape and energy drinks. So I'd love to get our experts' analysis. So guys, tell me what you think for the month.
So now that you hit all the headlines, we'll fill in some of the details. But yeah, you are absolutely right. Smokeless tobacco. Interesting fact there. Now we classify smokeless as all of the alternative nicotines, the pouches. So the Zyn, Rogue, On family is in smokeless. And year to date versus last year, that has the second highest growth category in the number of trips going to independent convenience stores. So we talk about our trips up, we talk about our units up, which is driving dollar sales, and that category itself has the second highest. I would bet most people wouldn't guess the top difference in baskets versus a year ago, but that is soft drinks, believe it or not. So those two categories are interesting. From a dollar perspective, smokeless or these modern alternative nicotine pouches, obviously seeing a much higher growth, but soft drinks are strong with the decline of energy.
Very
Yeah.
nice.
And John, when you think about those increased trips slash baskets, increased dollars for that modern oral segment, um, you know, everybody's top question, particularly the manufacturers or the brands within that sort of expanded tobacco nicotine space is, okay, where are those coming from? Where are those consumers coming from? Are they sort of new to the super category overall? Are they switching from some other form? Are they switching in their entirety? So they're going from combustible to modern oral. Are they using multiple forms? And when you think about our data set, those are all answers that we can provide. So for those in our audience that are listening and might have those questions, please certainly reach out to myself and Brandon. And those types of ad hoc studies are studies that we regularly do for those inquisitive, innovative brands.
Okay. So one of the things the report also highlighted was the segmentation of the market, with the Northeast doing a little better, a couple of states in the Northeast, but obviously the South, some states in the Southeast had a rough month due
Yeah.
to the storm. What did your numbers? What do the numbers tell us?
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you said. We started seeing um, on or around 9/23, September 23rd, um, sales, trips, et cetera, start to decline for Florida and Georgia.
Mhm.
And that sustained through the end of the month of September. Um, what we hadn't seen by month's end is sort of the subsequent impact of the other states. So, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, et cetera, we did not see that come through in our data in terms of transactions or sales in dollars within the month of September. We may see some evidence of that going into October, in the first few days of October. From a growth perspective, and this really isn't the first month, this might be the first month we've called it out or talked about it, but there's a substantial sort of percentage of our growth in transactions, dollars, and units sold that are coming from those Northeast states, particularly New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And when we talk about that, that's same store sales, right? So it's not if NRS has a new point of sale system in a store that wasn't there last year, right? We're looking at a same store scanning perspective. So interesting to see sort of a recurrence of growth coming from those three states. I don't know that we can at this point attribute it back to any type of event other than just increased traffic. Brandon, do you have any deeper insights there?
No, I would agree with you, and the traffic numbers are definitely up, which is driving dollars in units. But I do want to circle back to a couple of categories that John had mentioned with tequila and prepared cocktails. So tequila is solidifying itself as the spirit of choice among U.S. consumers, and we continue to see that growth year over year as well. It's up double digits, and it's primarily across many of the subcategories. And the RTD cocktails is another one that continues to have more than double digit growth. We're talking 40-50% increase, and it is around that is flavor, and the consumer's choice of flavor, increased flavor, that sort of thing, really speaks to what is driving demand. And then lastly, a category that continues to see a bit of an uptick as my speculation, energy, it goes down, are what is kind of being lumped into vitamins and supplements. It seems like U.S. consumers are kind of searching for an energy alternative, and they're finding some of that in the vitamins and supplements category.
Okay. And what else are we hearing about the markets down south? I was talking with Greg Parker, who has stores in the Savannah, Georgia area. He was without power for multiple weeks at about 45 of his stores. Are we hearing anything on whether these stores have come back online, that the storm impact has subsided?
To my knowledge, I think that a bit has been restored. As Suzy mentioned, kind of the Carolinas have had probably the most prolonged impact that we'll be able to kind of take a look at in October.
Okay. Now, looking forward, October, obviously the big month for chocolate and confections, Halloween. People are buying probably all throughout the month. Any insight into which way, will that provide strong sales growth?
John, I do think it's important to note, you had called out some of the declining categories. Every month we're on here, we're talking about some of the categories that are having secular decline, and generally we're seeing that rate of a decline month over month versus year ago, month by month, pretty static. What we did see in September, though, is chocolate and confectionery's rate of decline versus year ago had accelerated.
Okay.
And while the other categories that we've been really reporting on have remained somewhat stable or static. And that coming into a holiday month where, we know folks are starting to stock their pantries for Halloween, et cetera, earlier than ever, will be interesting to see with all of these other dynamics, price change, the GLP-1 situation, et cetera, if we have a strong October from a seasonality perspective, or not? And there's a lot of question around that for candy.
Which is kind of funny. I heard we talked about the Ozempics, the impact that Ozempic is having, and maybe I'm being a little paranoid. Maybe it's my time to go on a diet, but I am telling you, I'm noticing people are losing weight. Like people that I know that have historically been, let's just say, bigger, aren't as big. And it's pissing me off, but that's a personal thing. And two is they logic says they've got to be buying less food. They're eating less. And convenience stores and the stores that we cover are the place where they got those treats, where they got the confections, or they got the quick food. So long term, I mean, this is not a trend anymore, right? This is something we may have to start
Yeah.
reacting to.
Yeah. This is not I wouldn't call this a trend. Um, I think we're beginning to see it's a lifestyle change. It
Hmm.
has many favorable benefits beyond just weight loss in terms of overall health. I think we spoke a few months ago that a neighbor of mine actually works for a healthcare company, and they're doing a lot of forecasting and projections on overall what word am I looking for? Sort of disease and the
Hmm.
impact of the GLP-1 beyond just diabetes, right? Like heart conditions and kidney conditions and things like that, that will have seemingly fewer patients sort of in those categories. So the impact is quite broad. Every night you hear on the news that there's different headlines around what insurance will and will not cover, that there's variations of the formulation that are being approved that are less expensive than what folks have to pay out of pocket for. So at this point, it definitely looks like it's more than just a flash in the pan type of you know, blip or outlier trend, and is more of a permanent lifestyle change.
Sure. Good. Yeah.
Not to live in a bubble and be completely counter. I just want to call out a few things that are happening in our stores for perspective. So as we mentioned, our trips are still up versus a year ago. Dollars are still up. But a couple important things to keep in mind is the consumers are still spending roughly the same amount in a basket, and they're still buying in our stores, independent convenience bodega, they're still buying about 4 items in every basket. So it's the consumer still has that disposable income and is still kind of
Yeah,
trained to spend it. It's what they're
that's
choosing
great.
to spend it
Yeah,
on
what? And
is a little bit different.
yeah, and we all just came back from NACS, right? There were um and we were talking before we jumped on the call or jumped on the recording in terms of innovation. I would say that from what I saw from an innovation perspective, it was very heavy on the sort of protein, low carb offerings across the board, whether it was protein bars that are being offered by sort of traditional confectionery manufacturers, protein chips that are being offered by traditional salty snack manufacturers. Companies are beginning to recognize this and
Mhm.
innovate accordingly.
And I think something to be prepared for in the kind of on the horizon is we've seen the impact to chocolate and confections, but what's going to happen to the other categories? So we haven't seen it impact beer yet, or even flavored malt beverage that is probably higher in caloric intake, but or more sugary, but those continue to grow, as does we talked about soft drinks,
Mhm.
the sugary soft drinks. Like, will consumers, now that they're kind of losing weight, hunger suppressed, start making different choices in those categories as well? Time will tell.
Yeah, listen, there is a chicken provider at Nax that makes the most awesome chicken, and this is my unscientific analysis. Usually the line would be 15, 20 minutes and it would be wrapped around. And every time you went by there, There were a few people in line, not nearly. And this was a record attendance for this snack show. I think that a lot of people are cutting back on the fried foods and on the sugary beverages. Yes, to your point, because they can get them elsewhere. They get them in a protein drink, an infused water kind of thing. It's it is becoming the new reality. And for like for Susie, you said your neighbor, for these health companies, they will come around. If it's lowering cholesterol, if it's lowering heart disease, if it's eliminating diabetes, in the long term, that's what's going to make these healthcare provide these insurance companies more money. So they're almost better off covering the GLPs as they become more, mass produced and cheaper to produce, because it will save them money. It's cheaper, right? It's cheaper to make Ozempic than it is to pay for someone's 20-year run with diabetes.
That's correct. But for the healthcare provider,
Hmm.
that has ramifications on their revenue stream, right? Because they're
Yes.
not providing that chronic condition, providing treatment or care for that chronic condition in some cases for, decades upon decades.
Yeah, yeah. And all these things are starting to come under scrutiny. The red number 5 dyes and the yellow number 4 and the long term. No, it's finally in the public domain so that people are starting to question what they put in their bodies. That may or may not be a good thing for convenience stores. So we'll keep that to ourselves. But you're right. You'll start seeing more whole ingredients. So let's start to wrap up here. If you can, give us just a real quick, even though we touched on Halloween and Thanksgiving, what do you expect? Any trends over the next 2 months? Anything that you're starting to keep an eye on?
I mean, what we have seen in the past in terms of our stores around Thanksgiving, particularly week before, week after, is sort of due to the urban inner city nature of those stores. Um, we've seen traffic decline in November as folks go over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house, and not vice versa, over the bridge and through the tunnel to the apartment, in the Bronx. So again, we're expecting to see a little bit of a decline from a seasonality perspective, sort of due to that travel to family and friends around Thanksgiving. And then we see that rebound in December, and we don't see that same fluctuation happening over the Christmas New Year's period. So it'll be, again, data is always fascinating. History often repeats itself, but certainly not always. So it'll be interesting to see if history repeats itself as it pertains to those Thanksgiving related trips or not.
Mhm.
Additionally, as the drinking occasion moves more indoors and less around cookouts and tailgates and outdoor activities, it'll be interesting to see if the flavored malt beverages and the RTD cocktails will continue to see their increased growth, or will people kind of revert back to more bottled consumption.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So, Brandon, where can folks get this report? How can they?
That's the NRS Insights Same Store Sales Report. You can get that on your Google Alerts or through our parent company, ID2.net.
Great. So, thank you. On behalf of Brandon and Susie, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Guys, I appreciate your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Good. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. We hope to get you back on a future NRS Insights podcast. Have a good afternoon, everyone.